I'm going to say something that most people in this space will never say because they're too afraid of losing followers. Most men who are watching this right now will never change. Not because they're incapable, not because the information isn't available, not because they don't know what they need to do, but because knowing and doing are two completely different things. And the gap between those two things is where most men spend their entire lives. You've been consuming content. You've been watching videos, reading books, saving posts, feeling inspired. And then you go back to the same job, the same patterns, the same relationships, the same version of yourself that you said you were going to change 6 months ago. I'm not saying that to shame you. I'm saying it because it's true. And the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, is the only thing that has ever actually changed a man. So today I want to talk about why most men never change, and more importantly, what separates the few who do. Knowing and doing are two completely different things. The inspiration trap. That is the first reason most men never change. They are addicted to inspiration instead of committed to transformation. Think about how many times you felt fired up. You watched a video, read something powerful, had a conversation that hit different, and for a moment everything felt possible. You felt the energy. You felt the clarity. You told yourself this time is different. This time you're going to follow through. And then 48 hours later, nothing changed. The feeling faded. The routine pulled you back. And you went looking for the next piece of inspiration to recreate that feeling. That cycle of inspiration, motivation, inaction, and repeat, that is not growth. That is entertainment dressed up as growth. And most men never realize the difference. Inspiration without action is just entertainment. Real change doesn't feel like inspiration. Real change feels like discipline on the days when you don't feel anything. It feels like doing the work when the feeling is completely gone. It feels like choosing the hard thing when the easy thing is right there waiting. Motivation is a feeling, and feelings come and go. Commitment is a decision. And decisions, the real ones, don't move based on how you feel. The men who change are not the most motivated men. They are the most committed men. And commitment looks completely different from motivation. Motivation asks, how do I feel today? Commitment asks, what did I decide, and am I honoring that decision? Regardless of how I feel, most men have never made a real commitment to their own transformation. They've made wishes. They've made statements. They've made promises they intended to keep. But a real commitment, a decision so final that going back is not an option. Most men have never actually made that. The comfort addiction. This is the second reason most men never change. It's the most honest and painful one. They don't actually want to change badly enough to be uncomfortable. Change is uncomfortable. Real change, the kind that actually transforms a man from the inside out, requires sustained discomfort over a long period of time. It requires sitting with the wound instead of numbing it. It requires doing things you're not good at yet. It requires failing publicly. It requires letting go of the version of yourself that people know and stepping into a version of yourself that hasn't been proven yet. And most men would rather stay in a comfortable pain than walk into an uncomfortable growth. Most men prefer comfortable pain over uncomfortable growth. Think about that. A man stays in the wrong relationship for years, not because he doesn't know it's wrong, but because the discomfort of leaving feels worse than the discomfort of staying. A man stays in the wrong career for decades, not because he doesn't have a dream, but because the risk of pursuing it feels more threatening than the slow death of ignoring it. We choose familiar pain over unfamiliar possibility every single time, because the brain is wired for survival, not for greatness. And survival says stay where it's known, stay where it's predictable, stay where you can manage the outcome, even if the outcome is mediocre. Greatness requires you to override that wiring, to choose the unknown over the familiar, to walk toward the thing that scares you instead of away from it. And most men, when it really comes down to it, are not willing to do that. Not because they're weak, but because nobody ever taught them that the discomfort is the point, that the resistance is not a sign to stop. It's a sign that you're moving in the right direction. The identity problem. The third reason most men never change is the deepest one. And it has nothing to do with discipline or motivation or information. It has to do with identity. Here is the truth that most self-help content will never tell you. You will never consistently act in a way that contradicts who you believe you are. Read that again. You will never consistently act in a way that contradicts who you believe you are. If deep down you believe you are a man who fails, you will find a way to fail. Even when you're succeeding, you will sabotage it, because success feels like a lie about who you really are. If deep down you believe you are a man who doesn't deserve good things, you will unconsciously push away every good thing that comes into your life. The good woman, the good opportunity, the breakthrough. Because keeping it would require you to update your belief about yourself. And that update feels more threatening than the loss. You will never outperform your belief about yourself. This is why men can know everything they need to know and still not change. Because the knowledge lives in their head, but the identity lives in their bones. And the identity always wins. Scripture says in Romans 12:2, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." The transformation starts in the mind, not in the behavior. The behavior is just the evidence of what's happening in the mind. You cannot change what you do until you change who you believe you are. The men who changed, the real ones, they don't just change their habits. They change their identity. They stop seeing themselves as men who are trying to be better and start seeing themselves as men who are already becoming who God designed them to be. That shift from trying to becoming changes everything. So what separates the men who actually change from the men who stay stuck? I've thought about this a lot, and it comes down to 4 things. The first thing is they hit a real bottom. Not a motivational bottom, a real one. A moment so painful, so undeniable, so impossible to rationalize away, that the cost of staying the same finally exceeds the fear of changing. Most men change when the pain of their current reality finally becomes unbearable, not when the inspiration hits, when the pain becomes non-negotiable. And I want to say something about that. If you haven't hit that bottom yet, don't wait for it, because some men's bottoms are catastrophic. Some men lose everything before they decide to change. Don't make that your story. Choose the change before life forces it on you. The second thing is they stop lying to themselves. Most men are carrying a version of themselves in their head that is dramatically different from the reality of how they actually live. They think of themselves as disciplined, men who are just going through a rough patch. They think of themselves as good partners who just happen to keep making the same mistakes. They think of themselves as men of faith who just haven't been consistent lately. The men who change get brutally honest. They look at the actual inventory of their life, not the story they've been telling themselves. And they acknowledge the truth of where they actually are. That honesty is painful, but it is the beginning of everything. The third thing is they find accountability, not followers, not an audience, real accountability. A man or a group of men who know the real version of them, who know the goals they've set, and who will not let them off the hook when they start sliding back into old patterns. The book of Enoch speaks of men who walked in alignment, who kept each other accountable to truth, to purpose, to God. That principle is ancient because it is necessary. A man without accountability is a man whose good intentions never become consistent actions, because there is no one watching. And when no one is watching, the comfort always wins. Accountability is not optional, it is essential. The fourth thing, and this is the one that makes all the others possible, is they make a decision, not a wish, not a hope, not an intention, a decision. A final, non-negotiable, no going back decision that the old version of them is done. Not that they'll try to be different, not that they'll work on being different, but that they are different. Starting now, starting today. Not when the circumstances change, not when they feel ready, now. Because here is the truth about readiness. You will never feel ready. Readiness is a myth that keeps men waiting forever. The men who change don't wait until they feel ready. They decide, and then they build the readiness through the doing. So I want to ask you something directly, and I want you to sit with it honestly. Which man are you? Are you the man who watches this, feels the truth of it, saves it to come back to later, and then goes back to the same life? Or are you the man who hears this and decides, right now, in this moment, that something is going to be different? Because both options are available to you, right now, in this moment. The choice is completely yours. The information is not the problem. You have enough information. You've had enough information for years. The problem is the decision you keep not making. So make it, not tomorrow, not after the next video, not when things calm down, or when the timing is better, or when you feel more ready. Now, because the men who change, the few, the real ones, they didn't change because they had better information than you. They changed because they finally decided that the cost of staying the same was higher than the cost of becoming different. What is staying the same costing you? Your health, your relationships, your purpose, your peace, your legacy, your sons, your future. Is it worth it? I don't think it is. And deep down, neither do you. Most men will never change. That is the hard truth. Not because they can't, but because they won't make the one decision that makes everything else possible. But you are not most men. You're here. You've been here. You've been listening and learning and sitting with the uncomfortable truth of your own life. Now it's time to do something with it. The few men who change the world, who build something real, who break the cycles, who become the fathers and leaders and kings they were designed to be, they all started exactly where you are right now. The only difference between them and the man who never changes is a decision. Make it. Walk with God while you work for the crown. When he crowns you king, tell the world of the truth you found. That's king-level mindset. Kings don't beg. Kings don't bow. Kings build.